Good morning, everyone, and welcome to DataZoom's Leadership, Wisdom and Insight series. I will be speaking with leaders across sectors about their journeys, what makes them tick, and what the future holds, and what they think the next wave of disruption looks like. We'll bring leaders together from the areas of data and analytics, Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and many other wonderful technology areas. My name's Samir Sharma, and I will be your host this morning. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably with of your choice. And my guest today is the fantastic Vanessa Eriksson. Vanessa currently leads Chief Data Officer Advisory at here. I'm just going to move this. I think, Vanessa, you would describe yourself as a first-generation Chief Data Officer, wouldn't you?
Yes.
In that sense. So good morning to you and welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. Why don't you just say hello to everybody?
Yes, thank you, Samir. Hello, everybody. This is my first podcast, so please bear with me. Yes, like Samir said, I am a first-generation Chief Data Officer from Telia. And I think, Samir, I actually think about it like we were talking about our kids, because when you're actually in it and working with it, you don't realize. You've got your kids, you're raising them, and it's only when they're grown bigger and they're looking at moving out, you realize, wow, that's what I did. And that's how I feel about the Chief Data Officer, because while I was right there working with it, at Telia, I didn't realize, you're just working. And it's now when I've moved on, I realized, wow, I did the whole selling bit. So yes, first generation Chief Data Officer from Telia, and then at Division X. I've got a lot of experience with data and the strategy, the master data. Yes, and then I've been on Gartner's. Yeah.
Yeah, no, carry on.
Yes, I've been on Gartner's advisory board for a while, and like I said, I usually describe myself with 3 E's. I'm an eager, enthusiastic, and energetic person.
Absolutely, a way to describe yourself. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to give everybody a quick logistics on this morning. We'll probably be waxing lyrically for about 40 minutes. So while you're listening, there's a chat window. There's a chat icon here. So if you do want to send me any questions, you can literally click on that, find me if I'm there, I'll be there, and then just send me a question. What I will do is at the end of our conversation, I will then have a look at those that come in, and I'll just ask Vanessa some of those and sprinkle them into the conversation. With that said, let's get right to it. First question, I think, Vanessa.
Yeah.
You just alluded to the fact that you were the first generation Chief Data Officer at Telia, but tell me a little bit about how you got there. What was the motivation and passion that led you to becoming the Chief Data Officer?
I think my journey working with data, coming from the catwalks of Bombay where I grew up, it has been a long journey. I think it was when I was at, I started out at Eriksson with the Global Master Data Office, and then at Sony Eriksson, and it's only at Telia really where I started. I was working with the entire procurement area, master data management, and they didn't have a head of master data at that time, and that's what I was gunning for. I wanted to create the role and put myself in there. But then I ended up with, being head of data governance at Telia, working with the CFO at that time. It has been a long journey. Also, explaining to the CEO of Eurasia, Telia Eurasia, Erik Hallberg, what would a chief data officer do, and then also anchoring it with his management team, because we had the CTO and he was a bit, so what are you going to do, that is different from his job. And
it's an interesting point, actually.
Yes, yes, because I look at it today, and I think that I think there's a lot of friction between the CTO, the CIO, and the CDO.
Mm-hmm. And also the new invention or the new addition of the chief digital officer as well. But let me just jump back to that. The genesis of the officer, and certainly your journey. The CFO was obviously quite an interesting person to obviously report into, because they hold the purse strings and they're the people not necessarily have the vision, but who are a little bit more open, because they can see that yes, there's going to be some cost savings, but perhaps there's going to be some generation in terms of income or revenue. But tell me a little bit about that. How did that work with the CFO? I'm always interested to understand that leadership basis and how it sort of connect with the CFO.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CFO at Telia, I was trying to sell in the whole data governance at that time. And it was for a massive BI program that they were implementing at Telia, trying to get the whole data governance before who owns my data before we put it into the data warehouse. And when he understood what data governance was, he stopped the entire data governance within BI and said, go out, find me a case and do the data governance on it and show me how it works. So I think that was a very, very clever fellow there, because that's what got it started for Telia. On another note, Samir, I have to say, you recently or earlier this year, you published The Heroes of Data. And I resonate with that entire journey, because we went through the same process that you described. Okay. So I love that article of yours.
Thank you. That was a that I wrote basically on the after having a round table with a number of different CDOs. But anyway, that was an interesting piece. But back to you, I think more so this sort of triumvirate between the CTO, the CIO, and the CDO, and probably this extra person called the chief digital officer. How is that being handled? How is that going? What's the you talked about the friction, but where does it sort of get resolved, and how does it peak in the C-suite?
What I'm seeing, the trends that I see is, I don't see the digital officer jumping up and down at this point. It is more the CIO and the CTO that we're working with, where the CIO puts up his hand and says, you know what, we don't need this role. And I think there's a huge, because as soon as you start addressing the needs of a chief data officer, you get into suddenly the political scene where, or who is this person going to report to, and how is this going? So I think you're bringing in another dimension which threatens the CIO and CTO. And I think the easiest way forward is to get them to understand, listen, guys, you've always been there, but maybe not with the amount of data that we're dealing with today. So that's where you need, because you've had your job, and your job is really making sure that the data, is available within the systems. It's not about, the data officer is completely different. The role is different. So you need this person because it will help you. It's not, it's not there to take your job away. You do not have, you need, but you can't, but of course you can't address it that way. You've got to, sugarcoat it. So we're all accepting the role.
Yes, I understand what you mean about the sugarcoating. I dare say I'm not so great at sugarcoating sometimes, but
no, neither am I. It becomes very hard.
I think there's a dynamic that still exists, and I've been having conversations over the last couple of weeks actually on the same on the same type of equation, because what I've been talking about with a number of people is the fact that the chief data officer is now sort of becoming more deeply embedded in the C-suite. But what's the next sort of and I'll just plant that in your head. What I'm going to do is I'm move on to the next, because we could talk about that. Plant that seed in your head. But I just want to come back to my next question is, I did ask it before, but what makes you really passionate about data? That's what I really want to understand about people, and why do they want to, get into data and understand it, and what is it that drives you around that?
Yeah, but I think today that's an easy question, huh? Because I mean, it's the informed decisions, and privately, I mean, I consider me a very spontaneous person. If you ask my mother, she calls me an impulsive person. But I mean, we can't be, yes, we can't be spontaneous and impulsive with our decisions, because today, I mean, businesses are relying on this. So we need to, I mean, and then you have the data, you've got your informed decisions. But not so long ago, Samir, we were running around getting everybody to start treating data as an asset. But today, we're there. Mm-hmm. And I think today, being passionate about data is so easy, because I mean, if you're a mysterious, you like a bit of curiosity, to figure out the whole new business models. Where's the monetization potential? What can we do? What innovation can we do with this data? So I think there's so much that you can do today. It's easy to get passionate about about talking about data, whichever organization or whatever business you're in. Sure.
In that capacity, and thinking back to your days at Telia and so on, you are, you come across as very infectious. So I understand the passion, but how does that equate to when you've got to lead a bunch of people through sort of deep change? And that's what I think is interesting. The passion can come through, but many people I find are still quite skeptical about data and what it can do. One, because they've been burned before. Two, because they've invested too much. And three, because they've never really seen any results. And they've just got a swathe of technology that's driving something that they don't really know what to do with. So how do you move that? Where's that view of how do you move people from that thinking?
So I mean, if we're looking at the way we're working today, you typically find a POC, deliver value, and as soon as you deliver value, put it out in the organization, because not everybody is passionate about data. For the ones that are not, you have to actually, drive it in the organization. It's the whole culture change, because you've got to get people excited, and that's what I did at Telia. Because I mean, if you're doing data governance, that is, I mean, today. That is somehow such a heavy job, isn't it? It's
very sexy,
doing yes,
absolutely.
No. I mean the information models and stuff, and it's what gets people excited. I mean, recognizing that people are doing a good job. That is one way you can get more people interested in, and that's what I did at Telia. I got the CFO to give people rewards in a kind of ceremony to highlight that you are doing a fantastic job. So we gave them Data Stewards of the Month or something, but an award to let them feel good about themselves. And that is how you can actually change the culture, because everybody's then working for the same goal.
Sure. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on, because I can see the time ticking on, and these conversations can get very, very interesting. But from a leadership perspective, and I think from the view of you being a first generation, and we're talking about second generation and third, and some people are already talking about generation. But from a leadership perspective, what are the traits? What are the things, both professionally and personally, that a CDO needs to thrive in that position? And I know that there's lots of specific elements that are out there in terms of leadership, the core leadership. But what, from your viewpoint and very unique insights at Telia as a first generation, what really created that movement for you, and the traits that you required?
Yeah, I think first, professional and personal, it's kind of hard for me to make the difference, because it's basically, at the end of the day, it's you. What kind of a person are you? And I think for me, what made me successful was that I'm a very transparent person. I have no secret agenda, and I just communicate, this is what I'm doing, and this is what we're going to be doing together. Also the credibility. I managed to get that for myself, that people, the business believed in me. The rumor was that if Vanessa was in your project, it was going to be a success. So I think that I got people to believe, I got people to believe in my capabilities. What else? Communication. I think to be in a chief data officer role or a data leader, you can't be in the background. You have to be, you have to be out there. You have to shine and, just talk about it and get people to understand that, yes, I'm leading this. So, follow me. It's okay. And also motivated. You have to be able to, motivate yourself, drive forward. I think these are the ones, and also like the fast pace, enjoy it, because not everybody likes that pace. So it's those, I think, that are really important and that helped me at Telia.
I think you touched on something that I continuously provide to on various projects, but I think it's that evangelical mode, and talking about data ad nauseum, which I think you and I probably do quite a lot, because that's the passion that runs through our veins, bar our family life. I don't talk to my daughter about data. God, she'd be asleep in a second. Maybe I'll try that when I'm putting her to bed tonight. No, I think that evangelical ability, and I think that the other thing is that I still feel that the CDO is, and I know you talk about first generation and the fact that it's getting easier, but I suspect that there are lots and lots of organizations that haven't really worked out the CDO, haven't really understood where to put them. And I think, we're going to touch on it a bit later in one of the later questions. So again, where is the CDO transcending to? How do organizations build that capability? But we'll come to that later, because there is a couple of interesting questions, and just to bear those things in mind. But moving on, we've probably discussed it. I think we've probably talked about, the communication, the motivation, and sort of bringing people along, and being transparent.
I think the culture is also a big one here, Samir.
Yes.
To drive that data culture, because to be able to, and I guess it falls under communication, because it's not just the C-level that you're talking to, it's every level in the organization, because you need to get them onto your side, the ones that are, that are opposed, because not everybody agrees to what you're going to be doing. And
here's the rub. I hear a lot about data-driven culture, and don't get me wrong, I've written about it extensively, but recently I've started, thinking about every time something new comes out, everybody says we're going to have a new, so for example, it was data-driven, then it was digital-driven, now it's AI-driven, but actually it exists in the organization already. It's not data-driven. We've always been data-driven in that sense. So, explain to me that fabric of the data-driven view that you think. I have my own views on that, and I've written about them extensively very recently. So, but I really do think that the culture exists, but it's more so about how not how to break that culture, but how to bring that culture along, not to make it a data-driven culture. We've been using numbers and figures for many, many years. What's your perspective on that?
Today when I'm talking to clients, what I hear is, we've got a lot of data scientists, we've got a lot of insights, and we don't know how to use it. And I think that's where, how do you actually embed the way of working in your organization? That is one. But let's go back to the data governance aspect, which was the boring part.
Yeah.
And that's, to get all these data stewards, to start doing this definition work, oh my God, that was the most boring job, right? So how do you actually get them? Yes. And that's what I mean by getting the data culture, because this is, we're all gunning for the same thing. We all have the same vision. How do we actually get motivated to go forward? How do we get everybody to, if we see a discrepancy, how do you pull in all the other data stewards? And that is heavy work, and it's boring work.
Yes.
And how do you get them to get motivated to go on? That is what, for me, how do I build a culture?
Right. Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a good point, because as you said, it's the heavy lift that needs to be done at the beginning of a data governance project, and certainly we're working on with a very large charity at the moment on data governance, which, as you said, can be quite dull at the beginning, but equally once you start to build up, understand. So where I'm seeing is people who have been very curious or very or on the flip side, have been very skeptical about data. Once they start to see specific issues being highlighted and how it's going to affect them, and therefore if something is done about it, how it's actually going to help their business or their function, and what it's going to do in terms of understanding customers or uncovering process inefficiencies, etc. That's when I see the light bulb go off, and then they think, wow, really, you can do that with data? I love that light bulb moment when you see somebody, sort of firing off on all pistons in their mind, and they're thinking, either you're telling me great big whopping fibs, or you're actually gonna be doing something that's quite incredible. And I think that's what you mean about that, bringing those people on that journey, and I think it's adapting that culture and helping them to see where the benefits and where the outcomes or what the outcomes are going to be. So yeah, interesting point about the now I'm seeing data governance in a completely new light. Thank you for that. Believe me. Oh boy. Right. So let's talk about trends and technology, and in the coming year, where there's lots going on in this area. Data analytics is now at the fore of most organizations, and we are on page I turn in every magazine, on every website, in every kind of community, they are talking about data. The nice thing is that they've stopped talking about big data, which is great. I love that. But moving away from that, what do you think? What do you think is going to be the? I'm not asking for the one big thing, but maybe there's several things. Where do you think we're going with the CDO, and what's going to affect them in the next, say, 5 years?
Yes, I don't think it's the technology. At least, my gut doesn't tell me that it's technology, because technology will always keep evolving. So I'm not so convinced that it's going to be technology that affects this role. However, I think that it's going to be really, it's the data, it's the amount of data, because I think organizations, they've got so much data at their disposal today. And they don't want to compromise on, compliance or security. And I think that's the trend. Especially now with GDPR, live, and the recent the fire that Facebook was under also recently. Because and that makes it not just companies or organizations that are thinking about data, but it's individuals. It suddenly highlighted a completely different aspect of data. So I think companies are feeling the pressure of having this leader. If we don't call it the chief data officer, it's just having this data and analytics leader, because it's becoming more and more attractive to them to adopt this role.
Hopefully it's not just becoming a trend and they leave the CDO or head of data or head of whatever they want to call it in the sort of the doldrums, and sort of say, here we go, now we've ticked that box, here's the chief data officer, whatever we're going to call them, and we don't give them a remit. That's I'm hoping that's where they're not going. I've heard that in the last, say, 3 months. There are a number of CDOs I've been speaking to have exited from their positions, and mainly for that reason, where the vision or the impetus from the CEO or the C-suite or even the board was actually slightly delayed, slightly fragmented, and therefore didn't really know what to do with this individual or this role. So I don't know whether you're seeing that, and I know there's hundreds and thousands of companies that have still got to put a person in like that. but that's just an observation or an insight that I've had over the last couple of months.
I think it's also the analytics part that you also touched upon, where you said everywhere you're looking at data and analytics, every magazine, everything is talking about data and analytics. And I think that is the trend, well, let's not call it a trend, but that is really where organizations are investing. That is what I see today, that there's a lot of investing going on in analytical hubs. And then you need somebody, a leader, to lead that entire organization, that part for you, that function.
So I've heard in the grapevine now people are talking about a chief AI officer, which is beyond me completely. Is the CDO best suited to lead that forward? Yeah, I mean they're now about, I'm sure somebody will come up with a chief machine learning officer, which is ridiculous. But are we going in that vein? Are we going towards having too many chiefs? What's happening there?
No, I think there's a lot of focus on AI. I see that, but I have not heard about the chief AI officer. No, I don't think so. I think it is mostly that there's a lot of focus on that, but I believe that should come under the chief data officer.
Yeah,
in my
I agree
opinion.
with that. And the myth of deep AI right now and actual real true AI is purely a myth from where I'm sitting. Mostly machine learning and so on. But yes, I think. It was a conversation I was having with a chief data officer here and a number of, should I say, heads of data or whatever. But they were talking about AI as the trend. But they were having a tussle between the chief digital officer, which again is a really strange phenomenon, mainly because everybody's talking about digitization, but we've been going through it for ages now. Essentially, they were talking about this thing around. Well, I think. The chief AI officer will emerge because I believe it's actually probably some of the big analysts now they're talking about it in that way. So it's another trend that possibly will impinge on the chief data officer at some point. But I agree. I think the chief data officer holds the purse strings in terms of data itself. I think that drives the view of what will be done with AI in the future, and certainly, we'll build algorithms. So people have started talking about the chief analytics officer as well, which is an interesting one. Where does that sit? How does that look? I think it's a bit of a mess, to be honest.
Yes, yes, it definitely sounds like it.
Yeah. Yes. So,
I mean, you have a chief analytic officer if you've got, the big data lakes and big data programs. But I think that again, they report to the chief data officer. But again, I think a lot of these analytical programs, whether data lake or others, they're usually programs. They have a funding from typically the CFO, and that's where then they report to the CFO. But I think we have to keep in mind that those are programs and not a line function.
Okay, interesting. So, I'm going to move on because
yes.
Yeah, go on, carry on.
No. I think we need to keep in mind that they're programs and they have to end at some point. So it's just a temporary solution, temporary way of working, perhaps.
Yeah. Yes, I agree in some ways about them. They're being programs and they need to end. But data's persistent. It's never going to end in that sense. So even where I've got a data lake, I'm still expecting to be utilizing it and using it for either new product development or actually just for servicing the internal environment or customers, etc. But the thing is, from my perspective, I think that's it's becoming probably a little bit of a moot point where the chief analytics officer is sitting side by side with the chief data officer, and whether I think in the end that the CDO actually transcends to the board, which I believe is a great ability for the CDO from that level to actually look from a much higher level and drive the board activity, because as I said, data is persistent. It's always going to be there. It's growing, as you said earlier.
Yes.
But we're going to move on.
Yeah.
What's the one piece of advice that you'd give to organizations looking to hire chief data officers today?
I think that the organizations need to identify which area, what is the key area that they want, because there are so many. If you can identify, are we looking at innovation? Why are we bringing in the chief data officer? Is it compliance? Is it just enterprise data that we need to handle, or is it the whole innovation bit? Because I think bringing on a chief data officer with a massive scope is very challenging. So identify the area, and then the chief data officer can build from there. But to be able to help this person, into the organization, try to identify what is the key reason for you to bring on a chief data officer.
I think sometimes most companies don't know. And I think, it goes back to the conversation we had about the trend. I wrote an article actually at the beginning of this year where I said, we're talking about technology, but actually if we're going to start at data, we've got to go back to the basics. We've got to go back to building the foundational capabilities that's going to, be leveraged for all of those fancy footloose things that are coming in the future. And the CDO has got to think, and the organization has got to say, what is the strategy moving forward? Why are we doing this, as you say? But essentially, what is the strategy? How do we align that with our principles and our goals for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes.
And I think that's often, and it comes back to your point. I like the idea about not liked it. I think it's the worst idea in terms of an organization just lumping this huge big remit on a CDO. And I think that's why a number have failed. So I think the importance is to drive them into the CDO. The incoming CDO should actually take a little bit of the reins and actually advise the organization as to where they're going and why they're doing it and what they're doing, and start with the actual strategy and then work through that from, I think it goes back to what you said, the evangelical process from board down.
But however, sadly, when you're bringing on a new person, you have this fantastic role or job description, which covers everything. And of course, you have a new job, you're trying to impress, I want to do it all. So I think here, yes, it has to be a very strong person who says, hang on, this is not doable. We start with this, and based on the business strategy, we start with this and we can build up. So that is my advice to organizations that are hiring this role today. Be realistic. What is the most critical factor for you to get this person on board, this role?
Yeah. And what's motivating you to do so? It's not a trend. It's actually a business challenge that you're currently having.
Exactly.
Yeah, agreed. We're going to go into well, this is the final question. I'll probably ask you another question after this anyway. But Gartner come up with statistics all of the time, and I think we've been leaning towards this and culminating into this last question. But they're saying that 50% of appointed CDOs will fail in their journey, which is quite stark. And hopefully it won't be as bad as that. But what are your reflections on that? What have you seen? And you're on Gartner's. You advise Gartner.
I've been on it. Yes. I sadly agree because I've seen a couple of job descriptions, for the chief data officer, and my jaw just drops open. How could you possibly? Right. Because I think that's where the organizations have not identified. Am I looking for a data scientist, or am I looking for a technical person? What kind of role am I looking for? Because you want this all rounder. You want an evangelist. You want a data scientist. You want a technical technical person,
Yeah.
make up your mind. Yes. Because I mean, this person already has the challenge of, getting what is the value out of data for the organization. So it's an all-rounder that you're looking for. So I think that if organizations, I mean, it's connected back to our question 6, but if organizations can identify what is critical for us, and get a role description or a job description that is more fitting for the organization's strategy as well, I think then they will succeed.
I think you have a point there about organizations expecting almost like what I would, when I look at profiles of data scientists, everybody wants a unicorn. The way that you termed it, it sounds like, organizations want to find this unicorn, and perhaps that's why, 50% of them are failing. Probably because the expectations are too high. They expect, everything about data science, even to how to write an algorithm, which is ridiculous. And a deep technical individual, which is never really, you're never going to get all of those, to fit into an individual. And I think this is more, when I think about leadership, when I think about technology, I think, a person who's had maybe a hybrid role throughout their career, not exactly weighing on one side of the technology or one side of the business, but actually having that view across and being able to touch technology, but not, deeply. Maybe, at one point in their lives, they might have done a bit of programming, but the concepts and understanding, that they can speak to perhaps a data warehousing person, or they can understand the terminology that's coming up around the data lake, but then you have to be deep in it.
No, and that's what I advise my clients as well, because we're not looking for this technical person. That's why we have the CTO, we have our IT department. That's their job. I mean, yours is this person is to set the strategy based on the business strategy, and how do we get there, and then also look at the value about, the monetizing and the innovation aspects. So. I think that organizations just need to be a little more realistic today when setting this role.
Yeah, and the agenda for the role. I think I think that's an interesting point around setting this person up to actually succeed, and bringing them in from sometimes from a left field, but I also think sometimes from a left field they might fail. Because I guess it's the dichotomy, isn't it? You've had somebody who's deep into business. You've had somebody who's deep in. Maybe I'm contradicting myself now, but I'm just thinking about how to maybe that reason that they're failing. I don't know. Maybe it's a bigger question. Maybe it's a deeper thought process.
No, I think that it is just being realistic, Samir. It's just identify the priority and then move from there. And you want this role to succeed, so help this role as well in setting the right targets, the right KPIs.
Yes. So one of the things that I touched upon earlier was where this role transcends to. Where do you think the role of the CDO is going?
So today, I mean, while we expect that all chief data officers are reporting into the CEO, that is not really the case. It's a lot report to the COO, CTO, but I think so. I think we're on a journey. We've just gotten out. There's a lot of CDOs being appointed today, and I think the next would be everybody reporting to the CEO. But I absolutely see that this role is definitely moving on to working very closely with the board of directors.
Will it get a bit crowded in the C-suite?
No, I don't think so. That is my personal. I don't think so, and I think it's more of a challenge in aligning the others, the roles of the CTO and CIO. But I don't think it's going to get crowded. And I think that this is a role that is needed, much needed in most organizations,
Yeah.
because you know they don't know what to do with the data. So why not
Yes.
get somebody? And I think all this time, you know, organizations that have been doing without the CDO, I think they're getting a bit squeezed now. You know, they want this person in place, this leader in place to feel also comfortable that their data is in safe hands.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I'm gonna flip it over, but thank you so much. Well, actually, I've got one last question. What over the last year or so? What's your just for people out there? What's your favorite book that you've been reading or that you've been looking at around either leadership or data? What's something that you would if a CDO
what I would recommend, yes. Or I mean, I love Caroline's book on the Chief Data Officer Playbook, and I would highly recommend that. Yes, I would highly recommend that to anybody who is setting out on their journey, because I mean, I've used the book myself several times, and I have it at PwC, and I think that's the best book this year. So, I mean, and that is, yes, I think that everybody should have a read of it, especially if you are interested in the Chief Data Officer area. She's thought about everything.
Thank you. Perfect. On that note, I am going to just have a look at some questions. Some questions have come in. So I'm just going to pause the screen. Thank you very much. And I will just find out what those questions are. And right, here we go. Right, I'm just going to flip them out so I can actually read them. I think we've had some good comments. Right, here's a question for you, Vanessa, from Uren. What is your background in education, and what do you see as the best career path to becoming a CDO?
Oh, my background is not very relevant at all. And I'm sorry I'm disappointing you guys, because I said I was a catwalk model and I was very focused on that. So my education suffered. Ashamed to say that. But I think, yes.
Something I didn't know about you?
No. Well, I was busy making money modeling, so
wow,
yes.
Good for you.
We stopped that conversation there. But what do I think a Chief Data Officer would need? I think that I think there's a lot of lines. I mean, the business administration. I think those kind of lines are more relevant, but also the analytics. I mean, I'm working a lot with youngsters. You know, we take recruits directly in at PwC, and I think the whole analytics aspect is very helpful in this role. But also, I think business administration or business management, because of the whole strategy aspect. You're looking at, building strategies, data strategies. That is what I would advise them today.
Okay. I think you're right. I don't think there's really a set career for a CDO.
No, not yet. I mean, yeah. Maybe it will come.
Yeah, maybe there might. I mean, there are degrees out there which you can do now, which are labeled as sort of data science specific, but I've not seen anything that really transcends into the data strategy. But I guess you don't really need it if you're doing business and you're doing an MBA or something like that, and you've got a really good analytics. And I think that would probably give you. I think you need an MBA, to be honest. But I think it's more the journey where you've come from, and in terms of your workout, your career to date, how you've actually worked within the data area, and whether you've been in key positions, I think, and seen different things around the business. I mean, I know you talk about data governance, it being so boring, but actually that's at the core of the data strategy. If you don't have your governance in place, the rest of it is going to be terrible. It's going to be rubbish, garbage in, garbage out. So those kind of things, and I can see that from your sort of journey, where you've come up those type positions, and then moved into that CDO role, where then you've had a better view of an organization or processes that have been implemented. It's the next step. So I think a lot of people will come from either a governance background or coupled from maybe even a strategy background as well, which I'm currently seeing in the UK. I will go on. I think I'm going to go on to another question. So what do you think a CDO should be responsible for? Governance, analytics, advanced master data management, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, more, and what should be the order in case you need to prioritize?
I think the CDO should be, it's huge. It's governance, it's master data, it's data quality, it's compliance, it's data security, it's analytics, artificial intelligence. It's endless. But I think what they should, it's what they need to prioritize. It comes from the business strategy. So it's typically what is the organization, what is the goals, what is the focus area, and the CDO just needs to adapt their priorities to make sure that the company is delivering on what they say they are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think looking at, no, I agree. I don't think I think the order of priority for me is, I think it goes back to the strategy piece, and thinking about when you get into a position, and into that position particularly, and you're standing there and looking at the landscape and you're thinking, what on earth do I do with this business? I think it's literally going around and understanding where everybody is. And I think you said it earlier on. It's what's the value you're going to get out of it? And I think that's we can create data strategies, and people do, and I've seen them. I've seen data strategies that have been left on the shelf for 3 to 5 years, and no one's actually gone back to it and said, "Oh, are we not supposed to be doing that?" And the reason is because they never actually aligned it to the organizational strategy. So from that perspective, I think it's that view of the strategy first, and then to uncover all those areas in your value roadmap, which is, we're going to do we're going to have to get our governance in place, and with that, at the same time, we're going to give better business intelligence. And listen, we're going to think about doing some POCs which are, slightly more advanced or predictive, and then later on, maybe we're going to build we're going to do an AI strategy off the back of the data strategy. I think that kind of blends into how it morphs, but equally I think it's around setting up teams, because essentially CDOs go into a business sometimes with nothing. They don't have anything. They don't have teams. They don't they don't walk into a huge big practice of data scientists and analysts and engineers and developers and so on. They have to cobble it, which I'm assuming you will put it. It might have been different there, but I'm assuming it wasn't. What were your experiences? How did you then put that together?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, in Eurasia with 7 countries, it was different. I was a standalone chief data officer, but I used the resources from all the countries. So it was set the strategy and then implement it with the resources, anchor it with the CEOs of every country, and then use the chief security officer, the technical officer, to implement those strategies. Whereas in Division X, and it was exactly like you explained it. Build the strategy first, and then identify who are my owners. What are the POCs that we want to, or what are the low-hanging fruits? Which one can we deliver first to show value and also gain the credibility of the CDO office?
Good points all around. We have talked about one of the things that one of the questions that's come up. Well, I'll just throw it out there again, because I probably want to know from your perspective how much you knew about it. But how much should a CDO know about the newest technologies and trends, and how could he or she keep the knowledge up to date?
I think it's by reading. I mean, there's a lot happening on LinkedIn. There's a lot of groups, and you can really keep yourself updated. And then you also have the likes of, Gartner, Forrester, and PwC as well, that has a lot of white papers outside where you can see trends. So keeping yourself updated is not a challenge today. And what was the other question, Samir? I missed that.
So how much should a CDO know about the newest technology? So I think it comes back to, let's take it from a personal perspective. When you went into the role at Telia, how much did you really know? Oh, I don't want to give too much away, perhaps, but how deep does your knowledge go? I mean, I've spoken to CDOs where they're quite frankly saying, I just knew the concepts, and
yes.
But it was really about forming the team around me, which made the difference, because I'm not going to know deeply what a data layer will do and all the, well, I know what it will do, but I'm not going to really know the bits and bytes and how to connect it and do this.
No.
I don't want to know. But
no, absolutely.
What do you
yes.
think? Yeah.
So yes, I agree, because I mean you've got to keep so many things afloat and moving ahead, forward leaning, as I say, and I think, in my opinion, you don't need to know. That's not your job, So focus on what I mean. And at Division X, where we were doing innovation with devices and platforms, it's learning on the job, learning really fast, really quickly. What is the setup? What is my data? What am I looking at? So I think you can always keep yourself updated, but then fixing, or focusing on more what is relevant to you. What are my platforms? What are my data? What are we doing here? Trying to get more coming to terms with what I am dealing with here and now, or in the so that was Division X, and then at Telia, it was the whole big data lake, and trying to understand, because then it was so brand new. Okay, how does this really work? What are the trends that we see? What monetization capabilities do we have? So I think you can learn a lot about. You can read a lot about latest technologies, but it's another thing completely when you are actually hands-on with the
In that vein, I think we've got a few more minutes left, but I want to ask you one last question. What's the coolest thing you've ever done with data in being a CDO? What's the coolest thing? What's the really thing that sticks out in your mind, like, wow, that was amazing what we did there?
Yes, it was this the case that I worked on while I was at Division X, because we worked with an energy company, and we had sensors in people's homes and in office spaces to measure electricity consumption and water consumption. And we worked the whole weekend, to try and get that data from the devices into the Microsoft platform. And that was such a wow moment, I mean, and the next step was trying to look at the insights, what patterns did we see from the data. But it was just that whole weekend, texting the whole team and trying to say, has the data come? Because there were several failed attempts before we actually it finally got into the platform. So I think that was the biggest wow moment for me.
Well, and did that? I know sensor data is obviously and so on. It's moving at pace. But did that have any benefits when you?
Yes. For me, it was. As a woman, as a lone lady in this whole group of technical, very technical people, experts, all men, everybody jumping up and down. I was the only one who was thinking, wow, now we can see patterns. Do you know how sensitive this data is? It was coming with a completely different dimension to this group, to this excited group, because now we really need to think about how do we actually protect this data. It can't fall into, the wrong hands. So
Mhm.
I think working with solutions like that and looking at the data is it just gives you an awesome feeling.
So one last thing, you touched on it, and I know you're dedicated to this area, but Girls in Tech and Women in Parity, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I'm a mother of three girls. So, the whole, data is
Three girls.
it's
Oh, boy.
so, yeah, three girls, so top today. So
How
I
many
got to impress them, Samir.
Give me. Is that what it's all about? To impress our children? I see.
Yes.
I'm doing it wrong.
Yes.
I'm doing it completely wrong.
Yes. So, but also, I think, there's a lot being done both in Sweden and all over the world today to get more women in technology. And I don't know, I guess being a mom of three girls, I just have this personal ambition to, I got to help girls into the whole technology space. So my next event is on the 20th of this month. We're working again together with Telia, and perhaps Eriksson will also join us. So I'm really happy because I think a lot of companies are really dedicated to helping and supporting the cause of getting more girls in technology.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that's in Sweden.
Yes. At the Experience Center, PwC's Innovation Space office.
Perfect. And on that note and that plug, Vanessa, I'm going to thank you very much for your time. What a wonderful conversation we had. I wish I could talk more. I mean, we could go on.
We could talk forever. Yes, I know.
I know, but it's a really a real pleasure to speak to you. And thank you for your questions out there, everybody. I hope that we covered everything. And my next podcast will be in 2 weeks, where I will be speaking to somebody in the area of digital transformation. Thank you very much, Vanessa, once again.
Thank you, Samir.
And have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.